Accelerating Pediatric CAR T-Cell Progress, Point-of-Care Manufacturing and Expanding Access, Inspired Symposium.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kara Davis from Stanford, and I have the pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker today for our lunchtime. So I'd like to introduce you, who many of you already know, to Dr. Claudia Rossig, who received her medical degree at the University of Lübeck in Germany, and then joined the Department of Pediatric Hematology and Oncology at University Children's Hospital in Munster, Germany as a clinical fellow. She spent a couple years in Texas with Malcolm Brenner at the Center for Cell and Gene Therapy at Baylor. And after finishing her clinical training, returned to Germany and is now the director of the Department of Pediatric Hematology and Oncology in Munster, and recently has joined at Princess Maxima Center for Pediatric Oncology as an affiliated leader in their cellular immunotherapy group. Claudia's research centers on the development of cellular and immune therapies for pediatric tumors, both liquid and solid. And I think it's very notable here today that Claudia led the development and the engineering of the first GD2 CAR, and also was part of the trial that gave that to the first time for children. So we're really lucky to have her here to talk. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for the nice introduction. And thank you, the organizers, for the invitation to this wonderful meeting. It's my pleasure to share with you some thoughts and plans that we're having in Europe to expand access to CAR T cells in the future in the academic context. And I'll start with the key issues in pediatric oncology on CAR T cells, which essentially reflect what we are discussing at this meeting. It looks like the agenda, which I hadn't seen when I prepared this slide. So in B-ALL, we are the most advanced and now have the difficult task, and also what I think is the responsibility to introduce CAR T cells earlier in therapy to spare as many children as possible transplant and other toxic treatments. For non-B lineage leukemias, lymphomas, there are novel products coming up, and also for solid tumors where we need additional advances for more effective agents. And in these cancers, the difficulty will be to expanding the pipeline of investigation beyond phase 1 and 2 clinical trials. So imagine we have a GD2 specific, a B7H3 targeted CAR T cell product that proves to be effective in the phase 1 setting. What are we going to do next with it to really develop it in academic multi-center trials across the world? So that is what it's all about. And this is very well illustrated by a discussion that we have been having during the pandemic in various contexts, again, referring to B-ALL. There are discussions going on whether CAR T cells in this context can replace transplant simply by giving CAR T cells instead of transplant to all patients who have an indication in first or second line. So not treating in the relapse and refractory context, not waiting for that, but earlier on. Then watch and wait and only transplant those who relapse. And there are some more traditionalists who think the current gold standard is too good to go for that. There are others who are already doing it. And of course, we can deal with it by every institution just doing what they think is best, and then retrospectively looking at the results. But that obviously isn't the best way of approaching this. And a better way would be to do prospective studies, and this could either be a single-arm study, or we have even been discussing randomization to get the clearest possible answer, because indeed there is genuine uncertainty still in this field. So whenever we have been discussing this, there were a lot of opinions. It wasn't an easy discussion, but it ended up, sadly, always with the issue of access to a CAR T cell product. So which CAR T cell product could we use to perform such a clinical study in a not global, but larger context? We had asked Novartis, and they were not willing to provide their product for it. We cannot pay for it because no charity has sufficient amounts of funding for a study that would also cover the expenses of the product. And this is what it's all, where we are getting blocked at the moment. And this is not just in pediatric oncology. Even in medical oncology, there are access issues with CAR T cell products. And this was very obvious in Germany. maybe here as well, I don't know, when the BCMA CAR T cells came up and were approved. So there was a licensed agent for patients with refractory multiple myeloma, but it wasn't available to patients. They were on a waiting list, and many of them knew that they wouldn't probably live to get their product that could possibly extend their life or even save their lives. And that was a tragic situation, especially for also our colleagues who had to fight for their patients to get access to this product. So it's not just pediatric oncology, it is coming down to rare cancers or rare subpopulations of patients and will affect also adult indications. So we agreed that we will need alternative paths beyond industry manufactured and licensed products to secure patient access, not only in our rich countries, but also with the outreach component. So making CAR T-cell products available globally is also something that I think is our responsibility to work towards. And then also, I think that academic development in academic hands is something really precious that we shouldn't lose. And we do have these in pediatric oncology, these very well established clinical study platforms for advanced developments, phase 3 studies, treatment optimization studies, and to develop CAR T cells on this platform will require us to keep it in our hands. So I'd like to introduce the model that we're pursuing in Europe at the moment, and that we've started establishing, that we call a European platform of academic or decentralized manufacturing. And I'll start with a historic slide. So I take you back in European history. Persis and myself and some other ex-Malcolm Brenner postdocs had joined forces long time ago to start the first, and it ended up to be the first European CAR T-cell trial. That sounds great, but it took us 12 years from the idea to the first patient on study, and 10 years from the preclinical in vitro data being published. And that is definitely too long. Europe was not ready for this idea for CAR T cells. There were a lot of regulatory barriers. EBMT was not willing to sponsor, and it took them 2 years to say no. And all these issues happened, but there was also another factor, and that was manufacturing of the product. It was really not easy to get a license for manufacture of a CAR T cell product in those days. And at least that, also the attitude of the authorities, but also the manufacturing has changed. We do have semi-automated closed system devices now available that replace the previously very tedious manufacturing process. We don't need as high numbers of staff members any longer. So academia, against expectations by industry, only a few years ago, academia can do it. And you see on this photo on the upper right, the very first prodigy we had still in a normal lab. It's a C room, but it doesn't really look like it, but it is. And now we have upscaled this a little bit, and many of you also have. So yes, it is possible now. And this brings me to our model and vision of developing or rolling out a platform across Europe that allows us to perform multi-center, international trials, phase 1 and 2, but also advanced. So the idea is to have in each country that wants to participate at least one academic manufacturing site for an ATMP. The difference towards simple point of care manufacturing is that this site will not only manufacture for their own hospitals. So there will be trial sites in these individual countries that don't have licenses, that can't do it, but they still want to contribute patients. So the patients don't have to travel too far. Of course, there can't be lots of centers in trials in one country, so they may have to travel a little bit, but they don't have to travel to the manufacturing site. And so these products are exchanged within the country. Cross-border traffic should become possible one day, but at the moment we're avoiding it by establishing manufacturing centers in each country. And the examples you see on the map of Europe are just examples, and they are realistic, sort of, but there are additional ones, so don't take them for granted here. Don't look at which one has one and which one doesn't. But it just illustrates the principle. And some countries prefer, like Germany always wants to have lots of trial sites, lots of manufacturing sites, which isn't always the most effective way of doing it, but we don't really want to block centers from establishing this. And others are more thinking of a single one will be enough for the country, and we will allow all that. It will be a flexible model. So what are the prerequisites? You do need, of course, a competitive product to start with, and then also in the future, everything, of course, the product matters a lot. Viral vector supply has to come from a single source, a single provider, and within a clinical study, also from a single batch. You do need an automated procedure, which is robust, fully standardized and harmonized among the individual international manufacturing centers. And we are doing this with industry support. I mean, it's not a secret. We are working together with Miltenyi, and we are using the Prodigy, but there are other industry semi-automated manufacturing devices coming up, and there will be more industry in this. And I think it's no harm done to find industry cooperation that really works for both parts here. The manufacturing centers need to commit themselves substantially. It will still cost the institution a lot of money and commitment to be able to get a manufacturing license. They have to have not just the device, but also funding to for the trial runs and all that. So there is still significant efforts needed, and not every center that says, yes, we want to do it, is really realizing that. And it's still difficult to get licenses for CAR T-cell products, but it can be achieved. This all may sound fancy, but it isn't. It really isn't so original. India has already done it and has published it, not just in this publication that came out last year, that was also done in a Miltenyi cooperation, and that spread out Prodigy manufacturing CAR T cells across India. And there was a second initiative also in India, which is, of course, a huge country, that was published in abstract form at the ASH meeting. So it can be done, and it's kind of embarrassing that a country with much less limited resources than our countries is showing us how this can work. We have started establishing this in a single country, but multi-center trial in Germany, with a clinical trial where we simply went for another CD19 product. Nobody needs another CD19 CAR T-cell product. The difference with this product is that it's fresh to fresh manufacturing and delivery, but still we just used it as a prototype, as a model to establish decentralized manufacturing and convince authorities and go through this process, at least in Germany. And we are manufacturing at the moment at 3 different sites in Germany. And these sites are delivering the product to the trial sites, which can be manufacturing sites, but don't have to be. So it's just single country establishing the principle, and that's going very well. And we had no issues with the regulatory authorities. And so we are adopting this already for another trial that is close to submission now, that is addressing a more interesting target and more interesting product. It's a GD2 directed CAR T-cell product that releases IL-18 upon engagement in an inducible manner, upon engagement of antigen, to enforce the CAR T-cells in the hostile tumor microenvironment of patients with GD2 positive tumors. We are doing this as a multi-center trial in Germany now with 2 academic trial sites. And this illustrates what I mean. It doesn't always have to be the same manufacturing sites and the same trial sites. Once you have established this across Europe, you can even decide for which disease, for which product, which center wants to serve as manufacturing sites and which as trial site. So spreading this out across Europe, of course, is not easy, but we've started doing it, and we decided to use an IBFM clinical study in ALL, the INTRAL 2020 very high risk study, as a proof of concept study. It's depicted up there. I'm not really talking much about the outline of this study. The indication is pediatric very high risk ALL patients. So it's no longer relapse and refractory. It's second line, but patient really with poor prognosis, and transplant in these patients is replaced by the MBCAR19 product, which will be manufactured in various European countries and then given within this country at a larger number of trial sites. Franco Locatelli will be PI of this study, and we have our industry partner, Miltenyi Biotech, for the spreading out of the manufacturing. And we decided first we had planned to do this as an academic trial with Bambino Gesù as sponsor. But then when discussing this also with Miltenyi, we realized that we will be much faster if we use Miltenyi Biomedicine as a sponsor. And I think speed is really more important here than insisting on academic sponsorship. So we decided to do it in this type of cooperation. We discussed this with authorities because regulatory questions came up. How are you going to license a product that is manufactured in a decentralized manner by academic institutions? That's something that nobody had previously thought about. Should we aim to change the law? Because it is coming back and back to the question whether this type of licensing a CAR T-cell product just as a drug really was a smart decision, and maybe it's still reversible. I was told initially no, but at the moment we are getting so desperate about it that I think it may be worth fighting for it again. And I heard that there are some thoughts also in the United States, and maybe we can join forces. We also asked authorities, and we didn't have an official scientific advice, so this is all premature, but we do have some lobby organizations, Accelerate, who we talked about it. Would they accept the VHR study as a pivotal study? And would they allow us to use this just as a prototype study and then move on to further academic developments? And here are some preliminary answers. First of all, we realized that the authorities are recognizing the issue. They were really very open to all these thoughts and ideas, and had already thought about it a lot themselves. So this is the European Medicines Agency I'm talking about. For product approval across this decentralized platform, they don't see any major issues as long as we provide data demonstrating analytical comparability. And Miltenyi had already done that in Germany with these different sites. There's not much difference doing this now in the further European countries. They do like the idea of using a concrete project as a starting point, and they do like the idea of spreading out towards future projects and addressing this from the start. There was one thing that we were really surprised about. They did not like Miltenyi acting as a sponsor because they had just decided for themselves that they do want to address this issue. They want to address it their own way, and their own way is to enable academia to act as license holder. And they had done this with, we are doing this in Europe with the RE0001 product in Barcelona. And EMA had just published this call, which I don't expect you to read, just for you to believe me that this is taking place. So they want to support by giving scientific advice, and it's more by soft things that they want to support academia in obtaining doing their own developments and obtain their own licenses. They don't like hybrid models with a role for industry, essentially because they were disappointed by the development path that we've observed so far. But it does make it a little more difficult now with our thoughts, but never mind. So this brings me to a comparative table of all the different models. Industry, I don't think these models have to be looked at in a competitive manner. I think they should cooperate rather than compete, and we have to look at the indication, at the product, at the country to decide what's best. So a standard commercial license may still be the best way for a large indication. Just imagine that a prostate cancer CAR T-cell product comes up that also is effective against some small pediatric indication. Then let industry do it. It's the easiest for all of us, probably. But with the rarer indications and most pediatric indications that don't have overlaps which are not expected really so much with adult indications, we will need to think about academic developments. Industry simply won't do it without commercial interest. They are not there for it. I don't blame them for it. That's not how it works. And regarding academia, there's this centralized approach like the Barcelona model. There are some advantages, of course, with a single center, but I think academia as license holder really is, from my, and that's my opinion, is more a weakness than a strength, because it's too much responsibility also with upscaling. It's really not what we are there for. We are there for development and progress and not for standardization and commercialization. So I don't think this is the right path of development. And then also there's only a single site. So always the patients will have to travel, and then it's only one country. So it's maybe a bit short-sighted. So what we prefer with, I'm speaking on behalf of a group, I'll show you in a minute the group. So what we prefer is the decentralized approach, the charm of the distribution model. So the last column is that it opens up also to sites that are not able to manufacture, that only act as trial sites. So we have larger numbers of patients, and this will speed up the process. But licensing issues are not resolved. But this will probably, could be a good way for all typical pediatric indications. So to sum up, we do have, I would much rather talk about something scientific than these political and regulatory things, but it's our responsibility because we will not make progress if we just keep advancing the CAR T-cell products, but then don't know how to proceed with them. So it is important to find paths of development and talk to regulatory authorities and make this work. The models should be cooperative. I do think that close cooperation with agencies, but also with industry, is helpful and shouldn't be avoided. And I do think that we should together make a move towards changing the law. It may not be impossible because many people are acknowledging the need for that. And this brings me to introducing to you and acknowledging the CAR T-cell task force, which was founded out of despair a little bit at an IBFM meeting about a year ago to advise IBFM committees and to find solutions for these political regulatory issues to make CAR T-cells available and let academia stay in the driver's seat for CAR T-cell development. Happy to answer questions and hear your thoughts and ideas.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Claudia?
Yes.
Hey, Claudia. This is wonderful. Can you hear me?
Okay, sorry. I was just figuring out. Sorry, I wasn't aware. Yeah, I can hear you well.
How you doing? So it's great to hear this. I am just so delighted to see you all struggling with, coming up with creative ways to solve the problems that we are all struggling with. And I think all of your points are spot on. One thing I wonder about the marketing authorization, the clinical trial piece in academia, I think is something we all at least understand. It's part of our mission. It's part of our DNA. But once there is marketing authorization, have you thought about a nonprofit that, emanates from the group of academic investigators in the hospitals, but, takes it out of the hands of the academic institutions? Is there a way, because I wonder about the post-marketing, whether, who's responsible for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have no clue because as you and all of you here, I'm a pediatric oncologist and I am a scientist, a clinician scientist, but I have no idea about all these things. And I do think we are the right people to do post-marketing with a complex cell product that even the experienced people are missing clues. And that's why I don't like the new strategy by the European Medicines Agency. I think it can only be done in cooperation, or just dropping the whole license issue and handle a CAR T-cell product like a bone marrow transplant.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. I think the US and Europe should band together on this, and the models might be a little bit different, but we're all facing the same challenges. So just great to see this, Claudia. It's wonderful progress.
Thank you, Crystal.
So I couldn't agree more with what you've been talking about and what Crystal said. And can you please expound, aren't similar things going on with pediatric focused gene therapy? Because the exact same issue exists. These are all such rare and orphan indications, and we're going to get nowhere unless we figure out how to not only do some sort of decentralized manufacturing, but then again, whether it's a nonprofit or whether it becomes a procedure that's like a bone marrow transplant, I don't know. But tell us about similar efforts, because I think you're involved. I don't know if you're involved in the gene therapy efforts in Europe too, but there's a similar effort going on.
Yeah, I acknowledge that it's the same issue and that we should probably reach out to people doing that. But I myself am not involved in these studies, in the gene therapies for diseases. I'm a pediatric oncologist, really focusing on oncology and not gene therapy. But definitely, I mean, there will be indications with no commercial interest and certainly no return of investment, unless they are so expensive that nobody can afford them and all the health systems will crash or deny or no longer invest in that. And so we should definitely join forces also with them. It's a great idea to increase the impact when we go approach politicians about it.
So definitely you should join together, and what's happened is the more rare immune deficiencies.
Microphone 3, testing microphone 3, check, microphone 3. This microphone sounds good, it's a go. All right, I'm gonna turn this microphone off.
But okay. So, but just to finish this, again, what's happening is that the rare immune deficiencies that have been proven to work, people won't manufacture them because it will not be profitable, and companies are running away from it. And they're all gliding to ones that may be profitable. And so an academic model needs to happen. And so there's a large immune deficiency group and, sickle cell FAL group. They're all working on the same thing. So we should band together about this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. That was great. Just to piggyback on that, so ASGCT and ESGCT both have policy and advocacy working groups. And I think that I'm on the ASGCT one. I would love to invite you. And we've been talking with ESGCT. Yeah. I think that if we can really band together all of these separate efforts, because we have congressional meetings with the Congressional Cancer Caucus here, and they have meetings, with politicians there as well. But I think really trying to, put all of our interests and all of our suggestions in front of the people who actually make the laws. So.
If that will come out of this meeting, I mean, it's already worth it, this meeting, but if that will come out, we can really make an impact. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. I think that's going to be our last question for this session. So we need to move back over to the other room. Thank you, Claudia.
U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, National Institutes of Health, National Cancer Institute, cancer.gov, 1-800-4-CANCER.